Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Mariano Nunez Di Croce. I'm from Argentina. So when we get to the Q&A section, no jokes about the World Cup, and nothing never happened there for us, okay? So I'm here today to talk about SAP Backdoors. We're going to be spending the next hour talking about how a malicious intruder, a fraudster, could install a backdoor in an SAP system, perform really a fraud attack with that kind of compromise. First of all, I would like to know how many of you know that in your company you are running SAP? If you could raise your hands. Well, okay, pretty much all of you. Probably otherwise you will be in another talk. Okay, let's begin with this. So I work for a company in Argentina. It's called Onapsis. We are focused on the security of ERPs and business-critical applications. By business-critical applications, we are talking about SAP systems, but we are also going to be focused on Siebel, Oracle Business Suite, and JD Edwards. Okay. Our core business areas is the development of ERP security software. Probably you have not heard about X1 because we are kind of releasing it next week, but you can check our website for see some information. X1 is a ERP security vulnerability assessment and penetration testing suite. Who has ever heard about Bizploit? Hands up. Okay. Sapito, maybe? Okay. Bizploit is an open source project that is an ERP pen test framework. So you can download it from free from our website and do some kind of assessments over your ERP platforms. We also do security consulting services specialized in SAP and this kind of business-critical applications, and trainings as the one we were holding these last 2 days here on Blackhat. As I mentioned, I am Mariano from Argentina. I'm working as the Director of Research and Development at Onapsis currently. I was originally devoted to pen test and vulnerability research, so I come from that kind of technical field. I have discovered some vulnerabilities in critical software and spoken in some conferences around the world. Okay. So this is what we are going to go through in this presentation. We're going to make a quick introduction to SAP systems. Then we're going to see how it's possible for someone to create a ghost user in the SAP user master. We're going to see how backdoors can affect business modules and how it's possible to backdoor the authentication procedure of an SAP system. And then I'm going to present you a free tool that's called Onapsis Integrity Analyzer that is going to be helping you to prevent this kind or detect this kind of threats. So, what is SAP? SAP is, as you have many hands up, is actually the largest provider of business solutions in the world. So SAP has more than 140,000 implementations around the globe, actually more than 90,000 customers. Okay? More than 90,000 companies in the world are currently using SAP systems. Which kind of company? Usually not very small companies. Their SAP is used by pretty much every Fortune 500 worldwide company, governmental entities, defense facilities, and they use it not just to make a simple process or something that is not critical. They're running their everyday business process through that systems. Okay? So business process like invoicing, managing sales, managing financial planning, managing human resources, payrolls. So pretty much everything that happens in a company where SAP is deployed goes through that systems. Okay? So that's really critical information. So I guess that if you're in Blackhat, you pretty much all of you know what is a backdoor, but this is like just for refreshing. The idea of a backdoor could be defined of some special methods or techniques or tools that are implemented in an information system, usually after an unauthorized compromise, okay, something that is done after a compromise, with the purpose of securing future access to the system and trying to remain undetected. Okay? So that's what we are pretty much going to show today. So what's special about SAP Backdoors? We have been talking about backdoors for several years, pretty much since information systems exist. But the thing is that there was really little, or actually pretty much non-public information on how this threat affects SAP systems. Okay, so And you, most than no one, know that the fact that the information is not public, it doesn't mean that it's not being currently exploited, okay? Because you all know that there are a lot of people working in dark places, trying to do malicious activities. So, as I told you before, SAP is like a juicy target for malicious attackers. I'm also trying to make a point with what I think is the biggest misconception in the SAP security world. SAP security is usually considered a synonym of segregation of duties. Okay? When you talk about SAP security to one of your colleagues at your company, he's going to probably tell you that, yes, we do roll out some profiles, we manage user authorizations. What we're going to see, and what actually I made some presentations before, and in the trainings that we do, we try to show that SAP security is much more than segregation of duties. The thing is that still many standards and regulations still don't get it. Most of the leading companies still don't get it, and unfortunately some customers are still not getting it. Okay. So why are we talking about SAP security? I made my first presentation on Blackhat in 2007 in Blackhat Europe. I am still here talking about this, so why I'm keep bothering with you with this stuff. What's important to know is that SAP vulnerabilities are pretty much in a rise. This is a graph showing SAP security nodes, okay, that can be pretty much similar to what is Microsoft security bulletins. So you can see that SAP security team was probably pretty much relaxed in 2001. There's not so much work to do for them. And, well, it was growing slowly until, I hope that I have nothing to do with this because I did a presentation in 2007. But we see a really deep or a high increase on the number of security nodes that SAP releasing every year. So we were talking about less than 50, I think it's 20-something in 2007, and we are probably going to end this year with more than 300 security nodes, okay, per year. So it's something that's starting really to grow, and of course, if there is a security node there, it is fixing a security vulnerability, okay? So the security vulnerabilities that are currently existing for SAP software are rapidly growing, and so is the involved risks. Going to a technical level and explaining why segregation of duties is not enough, you should know that by default, just by knowing the IP address of an SAP system, a remote anonymous attacker can just execute operating system commands on any SAP system up to date that is left by default. And it's also possible due to some misconfigurations on SAP and Oracle installations. It's also possible to take, for an attacker to take complete control of an SAP Oracle database in pretty much any implementation that is currently running with default security settings. And I'm talking about no authentication, no kind of privilege, just anonymous and just getting network connectivity with the SAP server. So I think also this makes a point. We do security pen testing and we do vulnerability assessment to our customers. This is a particular example that during an assessment, we were testing a really tight SAP system was really SOT compliant from that point of view. And you have to believe me that this costs, and you may know it, that it costs really a lot of money to have this right, and it's not really common. But this system was possible to be compromised in a matter of seconds to exploitation of a technical vulnerability in the system. Okay? So with that kind of privilege, an attacker could have installed a backdoor for sure. So what's okay, we're talking about technical issues. What's the risk? Okay, what's the problem with these issues? We technical people used to say, okay, this is meaning problems for the confidentiality of your information, for the availability of your information, and for the integrity of information. But the thing is that if you're in your company and you tell this to your CFO or to your CEO, he's probably going to look like, yeah, I have a lot of stuff to go away. So I think it's a matter of communications, just to try to speak their language, okay? So we can say pretty much the same things with a different word. So if we're talking about confidentiality, we are talking about espionage attacks. We're talking about availability. We're talking about sabotage attacks. And integrity, we're talking about fraud. Okay? So maybe the CFO will now pay a little more attention to you. And it's actually not about scaring no one. The idea is just we have to be able to speak their language, okay? Because they are really pretty much the decision makers in the companies. Yeah, unfortunately. Okay. So I told you before that for someone, well, you know that for someone to install a backdoor in a system, he has already compromised it, okay? So all the things that we're going to be looking at today is what an attacker that has already compromised an SAP system, which techniques he can use to backdoor it. So in an SAP system, the threat model will be composed of these components. You have the base operating system, database layer, and then you have the SAP system running on top of that, where you have the technological application layer and the SAP business layer, okay? So the attacker could exploit vulnerabilities in any of these components, okay? So he may exploit an unpatched Windows vulnerability. Many SAP systems run unpatched. He may go through the database layer, exploiting some of this weak SAP Oracle architecture, or a database, an Oracle default password, or a SQL Server 2000 vulnerability. He might have been able to discover a weak profile. He's a user of the system, and he has a wide profile, so he can do more things that he should, and then he's able to get control of the system. Or he can directly attack the SAP technological layer. Okay? That is pretty much what we are working on. What you should know is that no matter what, I mean, any of these layers that the attacker gets to compromise, he will be able to compromise the whole platform. Okay? So I did this presentation on Blackhat in Europe, in Barcelona, a couple of months ago, and it was getting some press attention. And there were some mistakes because people thought that there was a database vulnerability. So this is what we're seeing is not a database vulnerability. The thing is that SAP has a lot of internal trust relationships between the different layers. So if an attacker gets to be OS administrator, he will be the same to get DBA of the database, and he can get SAPOL of the SAP system. SAPOL is like the most powerful profile. And it's like both ways. Okay? So he can, just getting one weak link, he can do anything that we're going to be showing today. You can check some presentations, all presentations for that. So while I was making this presentation, I was thinking that, okay, let's try to make it a bit more, or less boring. And we're going to be using a froster. Okay, so I want you to meet the froster that is going to make these attacks. Actually, I was trying to think who could I use to be the froster. So this first one came to my mind. You probably know him, Al Capone. But it was not good. It was a bit outdated. So I keep on thinking, and I thought about our friend Bernie Madoff. You probably know him. He was arrested a couple of years ago. But actually, it was really naive still for me. I mean, he did one of the biggest fraud in history, but he was still a bit naive. So then I realized that I have overlooked the biggest fraudster in history. That was Carlos Saúl Menem, former Argentinian president. That it's really, really the best criminal I've ever get to know of. Maybe you know him because he's from Argentina. Maybe you know his brother. So you see that in Argentina we're kind of ruled by monkeys. So they're pretty much the same. So okay, my name is going to be with